Hey, let's talk about games. Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, it's Airsick Hydra here. For those of you that do, welcome back, my friend. Nice to see you again. Here we are today talking about one of the most important topics related to Inquisitor Martyr for many people right now. It's a question I'm getting in the comments left, right and centre. I'm getting it in the stream all the time. And the question is, should I buy this game? Now, for those of you that have watched my previous video of should you buy into the alpha, I try to give you a realistic expectation as to what's within it, what's not within it, how the alpha's been going, how the progress has been looking, and allow you to make your own choice on that. Now we're up to a sort of a slightly bigger question of should you quote-unquote buy, pre-order, etc. Many of you guys are on the fence right now, and that's hopefully where this video is going to come in a little bit of use. Now, one thing I'm not going to do, and anyone that tells you to buy outright or not buy a game, you should just ignore. It is bad advice because they don't know you. They need to ask a bunch of questions. This is like me and my job. When someone comes to me and they say, my back hurts, and if I instantly said to them, oh, you've done this, without asking any questions back, I'm literally talking out of my bollocks and just having a guess. All players are different, they like different things, so what this video is going to hopefully do is going to help you establish whether you might like it or might not. So going over to the Steam page first, it's good to get a rough ballpark figure from the Steam reviews and guides, etc. They are a good place to pick up some information. They are also a good place to find some hilarious comments, but for the important figure, 75 to 80% is generally where the sort of the thumbs up has been for this game. Now, yes, we do have to take into consideration that there is a degree of bias due to it being an alpha with a high price tag. Simply because of those two features, it's put a lot of people off of buying the game, and I think it's fairly safe to sort of make the assumption that some of those players would have been harsher critiques than those that have joined the game currently, and there's probably a slightly higher ratio of fanboyism within the game, simply because it's an early access alpha that is quite expensive. So take that number with a pinch of salt. I don't know if it's going to go up at final release, if the final content's going to make it better. I don't know if it's going to go down at release, but for the moment, there are people that enjoy playing it. That's just something to get out into the open here and state as a fact that there are people that currently enjoy it. So the thing is, you got to figure out if you're going to be one of these people. Now, of those that don't like the game, this is where I think it's fairly straightforward to see if you might be one of these players that's going to give it a downvote. There's two main groups for this, and for those of you that are wondering, who are you to summarise all this data, Hydra? I've been here since before the alpha started making weekly videos on this game. I have done close to 150 videos just talking about this game. Not Let's Plays, I'm not interested in doing those, just talking about this game, its development, its features, etc. Any dramas, etc. It's you name it, I've talked about it, I've been here, I've done it. So I've seen every forum post too, I've been involved in all of them, and I feel like I've got a fairly good handle on what some people don't like about the game, and they're entirely entitled to too. The first of which is that the game is slow and clunky. Some people don't like the visuals, some people don't like the pace, some people don't like the general aesthetic of it, some people don't like the models and textures. But the game is too slow and clunky is a very, very featured piece of feedback. Now, what I would say here is you need to make sure that you've made effort and taken your time to look at the latest, and I mean from the last week or so, the latest footage of the forthcoming console release, because that is the only footage we have access to of the game pace at launch, because it's going to be quicker than it is now. So do not base your expectations from my old videos. Do not watch them to think what this game will look like in the final release. Look at the latest GameSpot videos, just type in Martyr console gameplay footage, filter it by the last week and have yourself a good look, because that stuff is going to actually set your expectations as to what the pace is going to be like. It's a bit quicker than it is now. It's not going to be much quicker than, well, it's not going to be quicker than other ARPGs, that's for sure. It's still a little bit on the slow side. The animations, you're going to have to make up your own mind if you like them or not. Some people I've met that like them, but there is a fairly notable crowd that feel like they're sort of a little bit stiff and clunky, and they doesn't look as fluid in terms of combat dynamics as games that they have played in the past. Obviously, you have to set your expectations here. It's an indie company, but you may even feel that as an indie company, they've not made the right choices in terms of X, Y, Z, etc. Now, the second category of player that doesn't like the game, a really common thing that people just have major gripes with, is the game build depth. Now, I'll give you a very brief outline as to how the build system works. You get a weapon. Those skills on that weapon are static. They will not change. They are fixed. The only exception to this is the Psyker, who has a combination of weapon-based abilities and character-based abilities. So if you want new weapon skills, you change weapon. You combine this with skill points, which are used to optimize how much plus or minus damage each of those weapon abilities do, but you do it via damage categories rather than skill. So you can basically up all of the single target damage ones, or you could up the aimed shot ability on there. You've got different ways to basically min-max the damage. Okay, no variation on playstyle thus far. That's where a lot of people take a look at it and say, this is rubbish, don't like it. What you have then to add in is the perk system, and if you think about, and yes, it's best to compare this to the cube system from Diablo 3. You basically get 3 legendary effects which you can pick. They're basically perks that will influence your gameplay a little bit, so there'll be things like not healing, but instead regenerating health at double the speed. It could be taking less damage when below 50% health. There's more being added at final release, but these are actually the things that will impact overall gameplay style. And then, and this is where the mystery lies in terms of build depth, you combine this with your actual sort of quote-unquote legendary effects on the weapons. Now, currently, there's only one effect per relic weapon, which means there's not a lot, basically. There's not a lot of these effects in the game right now. We know that there's going to be a lot more of them at release, but we don't know what they are. So all I'm going to suggest to you is, if you need to know how much you're going to be able to customize your gameplay, you need to wait until the developers do their end game build stream to have a look at actually how is the character complexity looking. Because if you just go with the first Steam comment that says there is no build complexity, there is no individual customization, well, they don't really know. That you cannot simply state this as a binary there is or isn't. There is not as much currently as there is in other games. However, if those relics contain legendary effects, quite possibly it will satisfy a chunk of those that are dissatisfied. Some will never like the fact that the weapon system contains fixed skills. We're not going to go into the justification for it here, but that is the second large category. And if you're leaning towards and thinking, oh, actually, yeah, I'm a little concerned about that, do your bloody homework. Look into it. There's so much gameplay footage out there. Granted, it's all of old builds, but you can really get a good feel for this game. Now, there is a sort of a demi-category too of people that don't like things, and this includes all the other sort of the minor gripes, and for some people they're major gripes. One would be the online mode, of which I would say, personally, I see adequate justification as to a game that includes predominantly online features, why it's based on an online mode. This is not a... Just look at the bloody game model. Just look at the forthcoming content. More than half of 80% of the features require a connection because it's based on community-based play. The whole season model was based on lots of people doing things and then results happening from that, community-based events. Think of it a little bit more like an MMO content release model. 4 to 6 weeks after release, we get our first mini expansion. An area opens up. Another 4 to 6 weeks later, the level cap increases and we all move forward together. Yes, you could maybe do that in an offline mode, but there is some efforts to go to explain it by the developers too in a sticky post. Have a little look. But for some people, that's enough to make them not want to play it. Now, the other things are that, and potential sort of red flags for players will be that the single player campaign, which is not the majority of the game, need to make that clear, it is a small piece of the game, is single player only. The campaign is single player. It's an odd design decision. The developers have basically justified it by saying that they want it to be an immersive experience that makes sense to the player. They want players to really pay attention to the story, enjoy the cutscenes, and whenever they dabbled with doing it in a multiplayer sense, they felt that just it was too hard to get involved in the story and listen to all the dialogue. It is not the main game, although you do use it as part of the leveling experience, so it's often referred to as the prologue to the game. Basically, it's about 10 to 15 hours worth from start to finish, from low level to max level. You can do some leveling without it, but it is the most efficient way to level, so it is a little bit odd. You might do a fair bit of your leveling without this. However, once that is done, for the content that is then released over the next 3 years of season content, that is all co-op. So then when the story progresses onward, you're going to have co-op content, so we believe. So that is something to think about. Now, other reasons you should be excited for this game, and in terms of what this is doing different as an ARPG, we touched on this briefly. The season-based model is something I think to be excited about, because it's actually aiming to be a game that is at least more persistent than your average ARPG. They are not making you recycle the existing content by making a new character when there's a season. The way a season works is it will basically open up the next area on the star map. You take your existing character that you've already leveled, you get access to some new enemies, missions, items, etc., and you move on through the new area and you gain the level cap. Halfway through a season, sort of the end game opens up, or the end of area. So what we're theorising at the moment is you'll spend 4 to 6 weeks getting to the end game and getting some gear grinded and getting yourself in a fairly competent state for an endgame build. Then you open up the endgame area and then you can work on upgrading your items and really unlocking a few other enchants or legendary effects to make your build absolutely awesome. And then after a few more weeks, etc, 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 the next area will open up. So it's basically this perpetual, hopefully, area in which we can have some fun. Now, in terms of the endgame content, that's going to be a little bit of a mystery. We'll do a separate video on that at some point. A lot of that's in the dark right now, so can't really give you a lot of information. There's quotes for sort of endless content. There is a sort of a war zone in which this will take place. We don't really know right now, but that's all stuff to look forward to. Guys, take a look at game footage if you want to decide if you want this game or not. Share this video with your friends if you need. If you got some people that are on the fence, help them decide for themselves. It's very dangerous when you say to people, just buy this game, because at the end of the day, they might hate top-down ARPGs. If you're buying this just because you're a Warhammer fan and you hated Diablo, there's a small chance you might like this, but there's a fairly high chance if you hate top-down ARPGs, you might hate this. It's a genre. It's a genre. It's not a twin stick, so if you love twin stick games, don't complain this isn't a twin stick, because it's not a twin stick. You know, it's not a third-person action adventure. It's not frickin' Space Marine. It's a top-down ARPG made by some indie developers. You might like it, you might not. Make your own mind up. Watch the latest footage, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.